You know what time it is. Ha! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Hi, y'all. Story time with Chris. We are back. As I explained to you on my Facebook post, I was very tired on Monday. It was a much busier day than what I had expected, but it is all good. I hope everybody's having a really good day. It's my favorite day of the week. Just got home from work. I showered. Take a sip of my tea. And I don't own the music that is playing in the background. But just to give some background for those who were not here for our last reading, the last time we were reading The Silver Chair, Eustace and Jill had encountered the Parliament of Owls, which is a group of owls, of talking owls in Narnia that serve the king. And they explained to them the story behind the missing lost prince, which is Prince Rilian, the son of Caspian X, Prince Caspian from the previous two books, Voyage of the Dawn Treader and Prince Caspian. So Caspian's an old man. He has not been able to find his son because anytime somebody goes out to look for him in the north, which is unfortunate, they go missing. Nobody ever hears from them again. They just disappear. They go missing. But now we're about to find out where our little adventurers are going next and what help they can receive, because as you know, one of the signs that Jill was instructed to remember was that they have to go to the ruined city of the ancient giants and find writing on a stone and do what the writing tells them to do. So, without further ado, I will begin. Chapter 5, Puddleglum. Jill was asleep. Ever since the Owls' Parliament began, she had been yawning terribly, and now she had dropped off. She was not at all pleased at being waked again, and finding herself lying on bare boards in a dusty belfry sort of place, completely dark and almost completely full of owls. She was even less pleased when she heard that they had to set off for somewhere else, and not, apparently, for bed on the Owl's back. "Oh, come on, Pole, buck up," said Eustace. "After all, it is an adventure." "I'm sick of adventures," said Jill crossly. She did, however, consent to climb on to Glenfeather's back, and was thoroughly waked up by the unexpected coldness of the air when he flew out with her into the night. The moon had disappeared, and there were no stars. Far behind her she could see a single lighted window well above the ground, doubtless in one of the towers of Cair Paravel. It made her long to be back in that delightful bedroom, snug in bed, watching the firelight on the walls. She put her hands under her cloak and wrapped it tightly around her. It was uncanny to hear two voices in the dark air a little distance away. Eustace and his owl were talking to one another. "He doesn't sound tired," thought Jill. She did not realize that he had been on great adventures in that world before, and that the Narnian air was bringing back to him a strength he had won when he sailed the eastern seas with King Caspian. Jill had to pinch herself to keep awake, for she knew that if she dozed on Glenfeather's back she would have probably fall off. When at last the two owls ended their flight, she climbed stiffly off Glenfeather and found herself on flat ground. A chilly wind was blowing, and they appeared to be in a place without trees. "Toohoo! Toohoo!" Glenfeather was calling. "Wake up, Puddleglum! Wake up! It is on the lion's business!" For a long time there was no reply. Then a long way off a dim light appeared and began to come nearer. With it came a voice. "Owls ahoy!" he said. "What is it? Is the king dead? Has an enemy landed in Narnia? Is it a flood or dragons, I shouldn't wonder?" When the light reached them, it turned out to be that of a large lantern. She could see very little of the person who held it. He seemed to be all legs and arms. The owls were talking to him, explaining everything, but she was too tired to listen. She tried to wake herself up a bit when she realized that they were saying goodbye to her. But she could never afterward remember much except that sooner or later she and Eustace were stooping to enter a low doorway, and then, were lying down on something soft and warm, and a voice was saying, "There you are. Best we can do. You lie cold and hard. Damp too, I shouldn't wonder. Wouldn't sleep a wink, most likely. Even if there isn't a thunderstorm, or a flood, or the wigwam doesn't fall down on all of us as I've known them do. Must make the best of it." But she was fast asleep before the voice had ended. When the children woke late next morning, they found that they were lying very dry and warm on beds of straw in a dark place. A triangular opening let in the daylight. "Where on earth are we?" asked Jill. "In the wigwam of a marshwiggle," said Eustace. "A what?" "A marshwiggle. And don't ask me what it is. I couldn't see it last night. I'm getting up. Let's go and look for it." "How beastly one feels after sleeping in one's clothes," said Jill, sitting up. "I was just thinking how nice it was not to have to dress," said Eustace. "Or wash either, I suppose," said Jill scornfully. But Eustace had already got up, yawned, shaken himself, and crawled out of the wigwam. Jill did the same. What they found outside was quite unlike the bit of Narnia they had seen on the day before. They were on a great flat plain which was cut into countless little islands by countless channels of water. The islands were covered with coarse grass and bordered with reeds and rushes. Sometimes there were beds of rushes about an acre in extent. Clouds of birds were constantly alighting in them and rising from them again. Duck, snipe, bitterns, herons. Many wigwams, like that in which they had passed the night, could be seen dotted about, but all at a good distance from one another, for marshwiggles are people who like privacy. Except for the fringe of the forest several miles to the south and west of them, there was not a tree in sight. Eastward, the flat marsh stretched two low sand hills on the horizon, and you could tell by the salt tang in the wind which blew from that direction that the sea lay over there. To the north there were low, pale-colored hills, in places bastioned with rock. The rest was all flat marsh. It would have been a depressing place on a wet evening, seen under a morning sun with a fresh wind blowing and the air filled with the cry of birds. There was something fine and fresh and clean about its loneliness. The children felt their spirits rise. "Where has that thingamagummy got to, I wonder?" said Jill. "The marshwiggle," said Eustace, as if he were rather proud of knowing the word. "I expect. Hello, that must be him." And then they both saw him sitting with his back to them, fishing about 50 yards away. He had been hard to see at first, because he was nearly the same color as the marsh, and because he sat so still. "I suppose we better go speak to him," said Jill. Eustace nodded. They both felt a little nervous. So there's our marshwiggle fishing. Hi, Terry. Thank you for watching. Oh, okay. So, Terry, I have something for you. I will try not to forget to bring it to work tomorrow. I have something for you. As they drew nearer, the figure turned its head and showed them a long, thin face with rather sunken cheeks, a tightly shut mouth, a sharp nose, and no beard. He was wearing a high, pointed hat with a steeple, with an enormously wide, flat brim. The hair, if you could call it hair, which hung over his large ears was greeny-gray, and each lock was flat rather than round, so that they were like tiny reeds. His expression was solemn, his complexion muddy, and you could see at once that he took a serious view of life. "Good morning, guests," he said. "Though when I say good, I don't mean it probably won't turn to rain, or it might snow, or fog, or thunder. You didn't get any sleep, I dare say?" "Yes, we did, though," said Jill. "We had a lovely night." "Ah," said the marshwiggle, shaking his head. "I see you're making the best of a bad job. That's right, you've been well brought up. You have. You've learned to put a good face on things." "Please, we don't know your name," said Eustace. Puddleglum's my name, but it doesn't matter if you forget it. I can always tell you again. The children sat down on each side of him. They now saw that he had very long legs and arms, so that although his body was not much bigger than a dwarf's, he would be taller than most men when he stood up. The fingers of his hands were webbed like a frog's, and so were his bare feet, which dangled in the muddy water. He was dressed in earth-colored clothes that hung loose about him. "I'm trying to catch a few eels to make an eel stew for our dinner," said Puddleglum, "though I should wonder if I didn't get any, and you won't like them much if I do." "Why not?" asked Eustace. "Well, there's not any reason that you should like our sort of victuals, though I've no doubt you'll put a bold face on things. All the same, while I am catching them, if you two would try to light the fire, no harm trying, the wood's behind the wigwam. It might be wet, you could light it inside the wigwam, and then we get all the smoke in our eyes. Or you could light it outside, and then the rain would come in and put it out. Here's my tinderbox. You wouldn't know how to use it, I expect." But Eustace had learned that sort of thing on his last adventure. The children ran back together to the wigwam and found the wood, and succeeded in lighting a fire which rather less than the usual difficulty. Then Eustace sat and took care of it while Jill went in and some sort of wash, not a very nice one, in the nearest channel. After that she saw to the fire and had a wash. Both felt a good deal fresher, but very hungry. Presently, the Marshwiggle joined them. In spite of his expectation of catching no eels, he had a dozen or so, which he had already skinned and cleaned and put a big pot on, mended the fire, and lighted his pipe. Marshwiggle smoked a very strange, heavy sort of tobacco, and the children noticed the smoke from Puddleglum's pipe hardly rose in the air at all. It trickled out of the bowl and downward and drifted along the ground like a mist. It was very black and set Eustace coughing. "Now," said Puddleglum, "those eels will take a mortal long time to cook, and either of you might faint with hunger before they are done. I know I knew a little girl, but I'd better not tell you that story. It might lower your spirits, and that's a thing I never do. So to keep your minds off your hunger, we might as well talk about our plans." "Yes, let's do," said Jill. "Can you help us find Prince Rilian?" The Marshwiggle sunk in his cheeks so they were hollower than you would have thought possible. "Well, I don't know what you call it help. I don't know if anyone can exactly help. It stands to reason we're not likely to get very far on our journey to the north, nor at this time of year, with the winter coming on soon and all, and an early winter too, by the look of things. But you mustn't let that make you downhearted. Very likely, what with enemies and mountains and rivers to cross, and losing our way, and next to nothing to eat, and sore feet, we'll hardly notice the weather. And if we don't get far enough to do any good, we might get far enough not to get back in a hurry." Here are the children, hanging out with Puddleglum. And if anybody knows about eating eels, please send me a recipe in my inbox, please. Thank you for watching, Milo. Both children noticed that he said "we" and not "you," and both exclaimed at the same moment, "Are you coming with us?" "Oh, yes, I'm coming, of course. Might as well, you see. I don't suppose we shall ever see the king back in Narnia, now that he's all set off for foreign parts, and he had a nasty cough when he left. And then there's Trumpkin. He's failing fast, and you'll find there'll been a bad harvest after this terribly dry summer, and I shouldn't wonder if some enemy attacked us, mark my words." "And how shall we start?" said Eustace. "Well," said the Marshwiggle very slowly, "all the others who ever went looking for Prince Rilian started from the fountain, the same fountain where Lord Rilian saw the lady. They went north, mostly, and as none of them ever came back, we can't exactly say how they got on." "We've got to start by finding a ruined city of giants," said Jill. "Aslan said so." Got to start by finding, have we? Answered Puddleglum. Not allowed to start by looking for it, I suppose. That's what I meant, of course, said Jill. And then we find it. Yes, when? Said Puddleglum very dryly. Doesn't anyone know where it is? Asked Eustace. I don't know about anyone, said Puddleglum, and I won't say I haven't heard of that ruined city. You wouldn't start from the fountain, though. You'd have to go across Ettinsmoor. That's where the ruined city is, if it's anywhere. But I've been as far in that direction as most people, and I've never got to any ruins, so I won't deceive you. Where's Ettinsmoor? Said Eustace. Look over there, northward, said Puddleglum, pointing with his pipe. See those hills and bits of cliff? That's the beginning of Ettinsmoor. But there's a river between us and the River Shribble. No bridges, of course. I suppose we can ford it, though, said Eustace. Well, it has been forded, admitted the Marshwinkle. Perhaps we shall meet people on Ettinsmoor who can tell us the way, said Jill. You're right about meeting people, said Puddleglum. What sort of people live there? She asked. It's not for me to say. They aren't all right in their own way, answered Puddleglum. If you like their way. Yes, but what are they? Pressed Jill. There are so many queer creatures in this country. I mean, are they animals or birds or dwarfs or what? The Marshwinkle gave a long whistle. I thought the owls had told you. They're giants. Jill winced. She had never liked giants, even in books, and she had once met one in a nightmare. Then she saw Eustace's face, which had turned rather green, and thought to herself, I bet he's in a worse funk than I am. That made her feel braver. The king told me long ago, said Eustace, that time when I was with him at sea, that he'd jolly well beaten those giants in war and made them pay him tribute. That's true enough, said Puddleglum. They're at peace with us all right, as long as we stay on our side of the Shribble. They won't do us any harm over on their side on the moor. Still, there's always a chance. If we don't get near any of them, and if none of them forget themselves, and if we're not seen, it's just possible we might get a long way. Look here, said Eustace, suddenly losing his temper, as people so easily do when they've been frightened. I don't believe the whole thing could be half as bad as you're making out, any more than the beds in the wigwam were hard or the wood was wet. I don't think Aslan would have sent us if there was so little chance as all that. He quite expected the Marshwinkle to give him an angry reply, but he only said, That's the spirit, Eustace. That's the way to talk. Put a good face on it. But we all need to be very careful about our tempers, seeing all the hard times we shall have to go through together. Won't do to quarrel, you know, at any rate. Don't begin it too soon. I know these expeditions usually end that way, knifing one another, I shouldn't wonder, before all's done. But the longer we can keep off it... Well, if you're so hopeless, interrupted Eustace, I think you'd better stay behind. Jill and I can go alone, can't we, Jill? Shut up and don't be an idiot, Eustace, said Jill hastily, terrified lest the Marshwinkle should take him at his word. Don't you lose heart, Jill, said Puddleglum. I'm coming, sure and certain. I'm not going to lose an opportunity like this. It will do me good. They all say, I mean the other Wiggles say, that I'm too flighty, don't take life seriously enough. And they've said it once, they've said it 1,000 times. Puddleglum, they've said, you're altogether too full of bombance and bounce and high spirits. You've got to learn that life isn't all fricasseed frogs and eel pie. You want something to slow you down a bit. We're only saying it for your own good, Puddleglum. That's what they say. Now a job like this, a journey up north just as winter's beginning, looking for a prince that probably isn't there, by way of a ruined city that no one has ever seen, will be just the thing. If that doesn't steady a chap, I don't know what will. I don't know, and he rubbed his big frog-like hands together, as if he were talking of going to a party or a pantomime. Which, by the way, children, pantomime was a popular form of entertainment where people would, like, utilize their hands to, like, make it seem as though they were holding objects or bringing it out of, giving personified things to objects. It was a really cool theater art. Pantomime is not much of a thing nowadays. Anyway. And now, he added, let's see how those eels are getting on. When the meal came, it was delicious, and the children had 2 large helpings each. At first, the Marsh Wiggle wouldn't believe that they really liked it, and when they had eaten so much that he had to believe them, he fell back on saying that it would probably disagree with them horribly. What's food for Wiggles may be poison for humans, I shouldn't wonder, he said. After the meal, they had tea in tins, and Puddleglum had a good many sips of a square black bottle. He offered the children some of it, but they thought it very nasty. The rest of the day was spent in preparations for an early start tomorrow morning. Puddleglum, being far the biggest, said he would carry 3 blankets with a large bit of bacon rolled up inside them. Jill was to carry the remains of the eels, some biscuit, and the tinderbox. Eustace was to carry both his own cloak and Jill's when they didn't want to wear them. And Eustace had Puddleglum's second best bow, and Puddleglum had his best one, though he said that what with winds and damp bowstrings and bad light and cold fingers, it was 100 to 1 against either of them hitting anything. He and Eustace both had swords. Eustace had brought the one which had been left out for him in his room at Cair Paravel, but Jill had to be content with her knife. There would have been a quarrel about this, but as soon as they started sparring, the Wiggle rubbed his hands and said, "Ah, there you are. I thought as much. That's what usually happens on adventures." This made them both shut up. All 3 went to bed early in the wigwam. This time, the children really had a rather bad night. That was because Puddleglum, after saying, "You better try for some sleep, you 2. Not that I suppose any of us will close an eye tonight," instantly went off into such a loud, continuous snore that when Jill at last got to sleep, she dreamed all night about road drills and waterfalls and being in express train tunnels. And that is where we will end for tonight. Thank you so much, y'all, for staying with us. Thank you for my new people that have been watching. Milo, Terry, thank you so much. As always, I like to say you do not have to watch these videos when they go live. I always upload them to my YouTube channel. Sometimes I have some technical issues where it won't download, but I always make the videos public so that people who do want to watch them are able to watch them. Which, I think I might have shown y'all this already, but yeah, my tattoo is it's getting healed up slowly but surely, but it is done, y'all. Shout out to Pierre Nagley and shout out to the Yellow Springs Art Collective. They do an amazing job, y'all. Please help out with the mural project here in Yellow Springs. I have posted it before on my page, and I will repost it probably later on tonight. If you would like to donate whatever form of compensation that you would like to put towards that, do it at your leisure. It does help make beautiful murals that highlight the beauty of Black and brown excellence and to commemorate the continuing strive for Black Lives Matter and fighting against systemic racism and injustices in this country. So y'all have a lovely night. I'll see y'all next time.